Bienvenidos a un capítulo más de Diálogos Sensoriales. En esta ocasión seguimos en la modalidad itinerante. Estamos ahora en Estados Unidos, en la parte oeste, y bueno, estamos visitando el estado de California y me toca platicar con una gran persona, un colega sensorial que conocemos ya desde hace un ratito y quisiera darle la bienvenida a Benoît. Benoît, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and speak about your history of sensory evolution.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's start, if you allow, to with how did you arrive to sensory? In your case, why is a French person in the US working in sensory?
How much time do we have?
The time you wanted.
All right. Yeah. So briefly, so I am from France originally, and I went all the way to college in France to a food engineering degree, actually. So I went to a food prep school, then went to engineering school, and that in engineering school, which was a food science school, had a section on sensory and statistics, and so that's how I got into that. Then I did a couple of internships. I actually did an internship in Danone when I was in France.
Okay.
And through them, I ended up having an opportunity to come to California and work at UC Davis with Professor Mahoney and do first some research from Danone for a couple of years. And then because I was doing quite a bit of research, publishing, that might as well get a degree out of it. So I got a PhD from UC Davis.
Wow.
And through my PhD, I met Dr. Daniel Ennis, who is the president of the Institute for Perception, which I joined in 2001. And it's been now about 23 years that I've been working. So I'm still in Davis. The Institute for Perception is based actually in Richmond, Virginia. But I've been in the field like this. So it's not something that was totally planned. It was more like, especially like many of us, you're exposed to so many opportunities during your school. And then there's something that resonated with me about measuring at the time, really the perception of food. But it went way beyond that throughout the years.
Right. Wow. So you had the opportunity to meet a lot of people there in Davis.
Oh, in Davis, absolutely. Of course, I was on campus, and Davis has been kind of the birthplace of sensory science with Rosemary Pangborn in the 50s and 60s. And after that, there have been great professors coming out of Davis, even though I would say that even though Davis is still a very strong university in terms of sensory, in the past 20 years, it's been definitely developing, in many other universities in the US, in Oregon, North Carolina State, Illinois, etc. There are definitely a lot of very good schools that provide great sensory training.
So your let's say fall in love with sensory was there in Davis or back in Danone?
I would say that yeah, I was looking for a job when I was at the time. So I was in France. So it worked out well. I don't know if I was in love with sensory at the time. I liked sensory very much,
Okay.
but that was a good opportunity for me, especially to go to the US and get exposed to new ideas and do some research for Danone at the time on the topic of sensory discognition testing. That's really what they were interested in. And that allowed me definitely to be exposed to and see how much broader sensory was. It was not just methodologies, it was not just statistics, but I was exposed working with Mike Omani as well as with Daniel Ennis, all the psychology associated with all those measurements. And to me, I was fascinated by these ideas.
Wow. And do you remember your first research in statistics or in sensory where you were like, okay, this is very difficult, and nowadays it's like another task in sensory?
Yeah, it's always difficult, working with human beings and collecting data. You always
Right.
have an idea, you get into it, and you get something different. Okay, we need to interpret it. Yeah, so it started when I was working with Dan and when I was doing my internships there. I did a lot of work on the preference mapping, internal preference mapping and external preference mapping. So it was more understanding the consumers. Of course, at the time, I had no clue about anything. Those were actually in the early 90s. Those were new methodologies that were being implemented into our field. And then when I got into UC Davis and worked with Michael Mani. That was when Thurstonnian models started to be implemented into the measurement of sensory data. And so I did a lot of research on the 3AFC, the triangle, comparing the results and basically testing the models, because those are really based on the models. The Thurstonnian models, you're supposed to do better with the 3AFC and the triangle, but then you need to, collect data to confirm that.
So you have been also involved, or you had this experience of the evolution of the data collection. I mean, and the analysis in both scenarios. I mean, because at the final 90s, we were like doing ANOVA by hand, or start doing it in R or other packages, the PCA. So now you're able to do almost everything with a computer, right? It's how is that better for the sensory researchers?
I don't know if it's better. Actually, what I think is it's faster.
Okay.
But I think it's a little bit like at first you mentioned doing. I don't remember doing it by hand, but it is true. We had to understand better all the statistics. I mean, I took the class from Michael Mani and understanding the F ratios and looking at the tables, the significance tables, etc.
Right.
Something that people don't do anymore.
Correct.
But what happens is that you tend to trust the software. You tend to trust. Put the data, and if something goes wrong, you might not know that something went wrong. So it's to me, what we do is actually when we teach in our courses, when we teach discrimination testing, Thurstonnian models, of course, it's quite complex. They are, decades of research and model developments, and we're telling people you don't have to understand the nitty-gritty details of the models, but it's kind of driving a car. It is good to know how the car works, where the steering wheel is and where the doors are.
Right.
And, if something goes wrong, you can look into it. But of course, you don't need to build the car. The car is there, you can use it. But that's why I think education is very important. Being able to know about the statistic, to understand. It's something that will make sensory scientists much more proficient at doing their jobs, at analyzing data, especially interpreting data in a proper way. So I think evolution-wise, so at least for the data collection, it's much faster. This something is good. I mean, at the beginning, doing stuff on paper and collecting data and tallying everything. And so of course there were some mistakes, tallying the data, all those things. It took much longer. Now we get the data automatically, and then we can even have a lot of analysis done very, very quickly. But at the same time, it's always very important. That's something that I always do, is always check the data and make sure that it makes sense instead of just reporting them. It's very important to always be very critical of the data and the results that we get.
Yeah, many people skip that part of validating or do descriptive statistics or whatever, playing with the raw data, and then they go straight
exactly.
to
Look at the distribution of the scores, because sometimes by doing that, you identify weaknesses of the data and whether the statistics will never apply to the data. It actually, if you don't get the proper distributions that you are expecting.
Right. What is something you miss from the, let's say, old school sensory?
Something that I would miss from old school sensory? I don't think I miss anything. I mean, I think that whatever I've learned in the past is still there and we're building on it. I mean, of course, everything is faster now.
Right.
You have less and less time to do the proper data collection. And again, when we work with our clients or when we teach our courses, like I was teaching a course last week in West Virginia, we really put a lot of say how important it is to get quality data. Because it's great to have a piece of software, you can get all kinds of nice graphics and nice colors and shapes, etc. But if the underlying data is not high quality, your interpretation could definitely be wrong. So I think this is something that, because now there's so much pressure to go fast and deliver results and interpretation and conclusions, that people don't pay as much attention to the importance of getting quality data. Because you always get the result. That's the thing. You always get the results. It's not going to tell you, hey, the data is bad. Sorry, I'm not going to give you the results. That would be nice. That would be a nice piece of software if I were to do that. So okay, I need to work on my data. but it's not something that that exists. So you get something, and then you assume the data was right, and then your conclusions would be appropriate, but it might not be. So I think the speed, which is everywhere. I mean, everything is faster now, so just need to work with it. But always, what I would always say is take a step back, think about it, make sure you give the right instructions, you prepare your samples the proper way, you check your codes, you make sure that the panelist or the consumer understands what they're supposed to be doing. All those things are all very important.
Right. So in these faster times, a good tool will be like take a breath, analyze your data, start reviewing it, and start doing analysis without the hurry of present everything tomorrow. No, something like that.
Exactly. That's what always was tricky because we've made mistakes ourselves because we were pressured by our clients so much to get things so quickly. And then we went back to the data and identified something and had to change it. And then when you have something, you have to change it, which, can happen. But then
Right.
people were already making decisions on your conclusions. That's something that can be an issue. So I think like something that we do, for instance, we have many partners all around the world where we work with in terms of data collection. Like in less than 2 weeks, I'm going to be in China. Actually, I'm going to be in Shanghai,
Oh, okay.
observing data collection. And this is something that we always do because you can send all the instructions, have all the documents that you have. You have calls with the partner, with connect the data, but you never know what's going to happen on day one.
Right.
And that's why we always go there, always because at the end of the day, we're going to have to analyze the data. And so we need to have confidence in the data. So that's something that we do. I've been traveling all around the world. I went to Istanbul, I went to Sweden, I went to Japan in the past couple of years, just because of that, to make sure that the data quality is good so that we
Right.
can really interpret it properly.
So in your opinion, of course, what's the most difficult task of doing sensory besides not taking the time to analyze the data?
Yeah, I think interestingly is that from what I think our company is different and we are known as being somewhat academic because we publish so much, we do so much research. And something that we use all the time is all those ideas, the Thurstonian ideas.
Mhm.
And this is something where Thurston published a very important paper in 1927, almost 100 years ago.
Right.
So it was not statistics, it was really just modeling. It was from on the psychological, the psychology part of the field. And those ideas, even though they've been so now almost 100 years old, they are really fundamental to measuring sensory differences. And I think this is something that over the years, people have found difficult. Those are ideas that haven't been taught at the university very much. I mean, Michael Mani, unfortunately, who passed away
Right.
this year, was one of the pioneer in implementing those ideas in our field. Daniel Ennis, of course, that's our company. We've been doing that, but very few universities actually teach it. It's kind of like almost a 2-hour session where they talk about it. I'm also an adjunct professor in the Ohio State University, and I've taught to grad students there. And we spent 2 months, 3 months talking about this, and this is what is needed. So you're talking about difficulty. I think like just going back to discrimination testing, for instance, the tetrad, which was not developed 10 years ago, but really its power was identified about 10 years ago by my colleagues John and Danny Ennis. This is something that would not have come out without the theory. And so the difficulty to me, that I can see is that people don't have the time to really invest into learning those
Right.
theories that are so very important and will allow us I believe, to get better data and interpret results in a more accurate way. So this is maybe the difficulty, the kind of like always take a step back and continue to learn all the time. There is new things that are possible to be learned.
Yeah, understand how to use it because it's there in the literature or in the software, and I'm able to use it, but I do not understand well.
Right.
It's that's the thing. No, try to understand better the methodology or the statistical analysis, etc.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Let's move a little bit with these two AFC questions for you. So there is no possibility of ties. So red wine or white wine?
Not any red, I'm kind of a Merlot kind of guy, but
Okay,
I like cabs as well. Not Pinot Noir as much, but okay, maybe too much information. Sorry. Okay, red.
that's fine, no problem. Uh, Tetra testing or triangle test?
Depends how much money, how much time you have, If you have a lot of money at a time, a triangle is fine. If you have less money, then go with tetrad.
Okay. City or forest?
More the forest. I was born in a very small village in France, and
Where did you born?
the northeast of France, so close to Alsace, close to
Okay.
Germany, that
Okay,
area.
okay, okay, okay. Traditional descriptive analysis or rapid methods?
Traditional.
Hamburger or coq au vin?
Depends on the day.
Ah,
I had coq au vin in the restaurant a couple of days ago. That was great.
okay.
Yeah, but sometimes hamburgers as well.
Yes. Analytical or consumer testing?
I'll say both. Both are important. Yeah.
Meat or fish?
I try to eat more fish, even though I eat from time to time.
Parametric or non-parametric statistics?
Parametric. That's where you can get most information, assuming that you have the proper data, of course.
Yes. PDF or published books, physical books?
Yeah, that's something that has changed over the years. It is true. Even though I like books, reading the books, PDFs are very, they're so easy to use. You can write on them, very easy, have it with you all the time. So
Right.
for all the papers and everything, that's true. I read them online now most of the time.
Okay. Preference mapping or PLS? I know your answer, I guess.
Why did you make that face?
Because I know your answer, but I just give you two options.
Be honest, I'll say neither.
Yeah, I
For various
know.
reasons that we explained in our course last week. And again, it's just it all comes down to the assumptions behind the methods,
Uh-huh.
and because we try to analyze data from liking. Liking is not a sensory attribute variable, and because of that, the way I see it is that those techniques are not that reliable. They could be misleading.
Okay, nice. Thank you for your answers. Okay, let's move to the final part of the interview. What is your opinion about the use of artificial intelligence in sensory?
For what I've seen, I mean, now this has been a topic for, I would say, 6, 7 years.
Mhm.
I know that in our company, I mean, when John Ennis was still with us, he started talking about it. What I see is that I don't think there's a great fit into what we do because of the amount of data we are able to collect from human subjects. To me, and what it kind of goes back to one of your previous questions, where one of the difficulties of doing sensory now, one of the thing see is that we're always interested. We see that we think that we have limitations in the current methodologies, so we always want new methodologies. It's always the new shiny objects. It was kind of like the measures of emotions in the 2010s. Now everybody wanted to do that. Say, oh, now we're going to understand it. That's going to explain everything, right? There was magnitude estimations, in the 70s, same thing. Like, how can we measure? Oh, now we're going to have exponents and everything's going to be more clear. And what happens to that is that there's no really theory behind it. It's just data collection, data interpretation.
Right.
And that's where I keep going back to Thurstonian ideas, because if you don't have Thurstonian ideas, it's like you cannot explain why the tetrad is better than a triangle test. It is more powerful, but why is that? And if you don't have the psychology in it, that's something that's not going to be, I mean, you're not going to be able to explain it. And the psychology is really something that's lacking in our field. What happened is, like, in the 50s, Rosemary Pangborn, she got in touch with statisticians first instead of psychologists. And so statisticians are good with data in terms of yes, no, white, black kind of conclusions, and have a p-value. But the psychology is really missing. and because something that's very, very important that we've been really doing research on right now is companies have internal panels, they have internal capabilities, and they're spending a lot of time and money finding if there's a difference, what kind of difference there is. And how do they know that what they do internally is predictive of the consumer?
Mhm.
And this is a link that now we've been working on it for the past almost 10 years, trying to implement that. Because if you do when you ask me the tetrad and a triangle, okay, tetrad probably is better, but then how many tetrads do you want? Do you do with 20 panelists,
Mhm.
500 panelists, 2 panelists? How many do you have? And the only way to answer that question, it is what is a size of a difference that consumer relevant? That if you conclude there's no difference, that consumers are going to be fine with it, and that if there is a difference, that consumers could reject the product. And that link is very, very important. That's something that Thorstonian modeling can provide. So all the AI, to me, it's just a new way of analyzing data. And there's no process. AI cannot explain what the tetrad is better than the triangle.
Mhm.
It's just going to look at the data from one, from the other, and do something. But we don't understand how it makes decisions. So to me, AI right now, at least in its current form, is not really that useful for our field. I think I would prefer to go back to the psychology, to the methodologies, and try to understand better to make predictions. I don't think AI is going to provide us with that predictability power.
Right, I agree. So I guess the best way to refund the advances in sensory is like, okay, let's go back a little bit, understand the fundamentals, and let's go ahead. Something like that.
Yeah, I think so. There's a steps, basically, that have been,
Mhm.
that have not taken into consideration over the years, and it all depends of who is teaching, who is learning, the capabilities at the time, various labs and universities, etc. But what I'm thinking is that I remember one time somebody asked me, Benoit, when are you going to stop talking about Thurstonian modeling? And I said, never. I mean, never, because this is so useful. There's nothing else beside that. All the idea of this, because that's the only model that encompasses psychology. The psychology we use consumers, we use panelists, those are human beings. We give them instructions. They
Right.
make decisions based on the instruction and the perception of the products. And those psychology needs to be taken into consideration. And many
Mhm.
techniques are there, like AI. Doesn't matter where the data is coming from, right? It's just data, and it's going to build a model something to make predictions. And there are some limitations because of the psychology associated with sensory science. And
Right.
this is where it becomes a science, is when you can really explain and use the models to make predictions. And that's something that we need more of, I think, in our field.
Hmm. Okay, right. In this sense, speaking about all the things that are involved in sensory, do you remember some client person who is or wasn't accepting sensory, and it was difficult to accept a particular part of sensory? Besides this is subjective, but something that it is or it was not clear for that person. Do you have some memory of that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that all the sensory departments, in product development, they all have faced a situation where their work is not being appreciated, where actually people who don't have any kind of training in sensory will think that they can do it themselves. Because it's true. People can apply soap, they can use a shampoo, they can eat cereals, they can drink beer. So how complicated can it be for you to tell me whether those two products are different? I mean, I could do it myself. I can ask my
Yes.
children, not for the beer, but I can ask my children,
No, it's right.
and they would be able to tell me. So they don't understand, because this is something. It's like companies would spend millions of dollars on a new piece of equipment, like in the lab,
Right.
analytical equipment. They would spend amazing on a new piece of equipment in a pilot plant. But for sensor, it's so much more difficult, for even though it's so essential to get proper data and proper predictability to consumers from the internal program, that a lot of money should be invested in it. But it's always very difficult for those groups to find the funding, even though because
Mhm.
marketing deals with consumer directly, and advertising is, they feel it has really an impact. But for the sensory, it's something that's not really appreciated.
Mhm.
And this is definitely difficult. I've heard that many times. So part of it, though, is that often sensory groups maybe don't have the proper training, so that it's difficult for them to convince their managers of the
Right.
quality of their findings. And they can, maybe sometimes it's difficult to answer a question very clearly and definitively. And that's where getting the proper background to sensory measurements is very important, because the better tools you have, the better you can use them to convince, you know, anyone around you. And this is
Right.
something that I think is very useful, very important.
And well, what will be, in your opinion, the minimum skills in methodologies or in learning or whatever that sensory scientists should have, at least? I know that there are a lot, but at least
Sure.
some of them.
Yeah, I think like for, like in food chemistry or food processing, you always, if you work in those jobs, you always be um, expected to have taken classes,
Mhm.
right? Like if you think of students coming out of university. And food science, I mean, sensory science should be the same thing. Is that it's very important. Even though many, like just at our course last week, there were like 2 or 3 participants who were not sensory scientists per se. They just, got this job because okay, we need to have someone in sensory, so you're going to go from food microbiology. I mean, you're a scientist. Why don't you go to food to sensory now? No, that'd be fine. I'm sure you get learn on the job. You will never do that. Like imagine like a pharmacist or a doctor. Hey, why don't you go be a surgeon? That's okay. Learn on the job.
Yeah, that happens.
So it's a little bit like this. So, yeah, I would say a minimum, it would be knowing about methodologies, but really understanding really the background, not just how to practice them, how to
Right.
use them, but really how they all relate to one another. And then the models. I think that's if you've had sensory training, but without having aspect of psychology associated with this training, I think this is one part that's missing. And it's not taught in many universities because there's not much time about it. Everything is about statistics and methodologies, but there is a psychology that's very important. And I mean, I know our courses, that's what we do. Like last week, people say, but how come you don't, people don't know about all this stuff, all the Thurstonian ideas and linking consumers to trained panel, etc. I said, because I think universities should teach that, professors should teach that, but there's so few of them, and there's so much to cover that they cannot cover that. I mean, as I said, I spent 2 months with a student myself just talking about that.
Mhm.
So it is, a little bit everywhere. Like sensory needs to be more important, and with better means to teach the students. And I think the psychology aspect of it is very important. So it will always be very helpful to convince others, like managers, supervisors, stakeholders, to trust the results from this kind of research.
All right. Is there a current research you are doing that you want to share with us? Something that is coming to publishing?
Yeah, something that it's just something very practical. We talked about the triangle test. This is something that doing with the Davis Sensory Institute actually as a collaboration. Everybody knows, well, I don't know so the three F's in a triangle, and then for 40 years, 50 years, people have said, oh, you do better in a 3FC because you know what you're looking for, right? Because you'd say, okay, find the one that's sweeter. In a triangle, you say find the one that's different from the other two.
Right.
And so we did a piece of research where we have a triangle. We say, well, find the one that's different on sweetness from the other two. So we tell them what to look for, right? Find the one that's different on sweetness, and for the 3FC, find the one that's the sweetest of the three, or the one that's the least sweet of the three.
Mhm.
And what you find is that even if you tell people in the triangle test to find the one that's the different on sweetness, they don't do as well as the 3FC. So just knowing, so that's where the psychology comes in, because you
Right.
cannot explain it. How come in both cases they know what they're looking for? They're looking into sweetness, but you said which one is different or which one is the strongest. You do so
Right.
much better in how do you explain that? That's the psychology. So that's a piece of research, very simple. That's something we'll present, I think, at Pangborn next year, to show people of the importance of taking into account the psychology behind all those methodologies.
Right. It's not so easy at the end.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not
Yeah.
complicated. It's not so easy, but it's not complicated. You
Right.
know,
I know.
it's like
Yes, yes.
it's just like anything. You need to learn the same way. Like everybody like statistics. Oh, well, it's complicated, but they use it and they understand it broadly. It's kind of the same thing. You need to invest a little bit of time into it.
Yeah, I would say if it is not complicated, if you know how to do that.
Right. Exactly. But that's it. Like any skills, it's like, oh,
Right?
playing tennis
Correct.
is complicated. Well, if you take a racket and start hitting it, I mean, the more you hit it, the better you become at it. If you
Correct.
never pick up a tennis racket, you will never get better at it.
Perfect. Wow, time is flying. I have a couple of questions and we are done. But do you have a sensory book, paper, or poster to suggest to the people who is actually doing sensory? Like this is.
I was expecting your question. And actually, this is a book, so it's Tools and Application of Sensory Consumer Science.
Okay.
That we've published ourselves, the
Okay.
Institute for Perception. So if you want the paper copy like this, I mean, you can purchase it on our website. But
Right.
if you're just, we're talking about PDFs, right? If you just want the book on your phone and iPad and computer, you can actually go to our website, www.ifpress.com.
Uh-huh.
Then you can download it for free.
Okay.
And there's another book, there's on the advertising claims, or also a book on Thurstonian modeling written by Danny Ennis, but that's really the engine of the car. So unless you want to get, you're ready to get your hands dirty,
Okay.
I would say, okay, just know it's there. Even I have a somewhat difficulty because it's really the hard math all behind all those models. But it's good to have, to see how to build that engine, because you might have some colleagues who actually could
Right. Right.
enjoy it. So I think this really focuses on the psychology and the methodology and the statistics. So it has everything in there. I know, of course, the usual, like the Hildegard Heyman book with that is very good book and a very good overview. But what I would say for the other books is the fact that they rely so much on statistics. And to me, you cannot have just statistics. You need to have the psychology.
Correct.
So I think, and that could, anyway, so this book, that's the one I would recommend.
Perfect. Thank you. And my final question will be, let's say you are in Danone at that time, and you have or we have a time machine. You go there and have the opportunity to tell Benoit, young Benoit, or that time Benoit, something. What can you tell to him to improve your life or your sensory skills or something? Or not?
Yeah, I'll say never stop learning.
Okay.
Always, that's or right now developing our skills, like coding a little bit. This is something that I definitely didn't have at the time, and that's definitely something that's very useful. So always never think that you know everything.
Right.
Never, and that's why we always conduct research, right? That's why we have conferences, people share results, because we know we don't know everything. We always try to improve. So always, stay curious, always
Right.
stay interested, and always question also. Don't trust the old guys like us. Don't trust the guys that have been in the field for so long, and because they've been in the field for so long, they know everything. It's not the case.
Right.
They always question everything. Always try to get information from different sources and to try. That's always going to be helpful going forward.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time and your desire to share your history and experiences to the people who is looking at this video. I'm pretty sure people is going to be inspired with your history, your visions, your comments, and something else you would like to add?
Not really. I mean, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I mean, it was great to share that with everyone. And it's always nice to have, I mean, I've looked at some of your other videos, and it's nice to see how there's so much variety in terms of the background of people in our field, how they
Yes,
get here. It's so
that's
very interesting.
interesting. Yeah, we normally arrive to sensory by casualty. I mean, it's like
Yeah,
okay, I
it's
was
by
working there.
chance.
Let's
It's
start
not
to do.
something like my son, he's wanted to be a doctor since he was 10 years old. So that's something he wanted to. I didn't want to be a sensory scientist when I was 10. At least I don't remember that. And I've never heard anyone say, hey, I want to be a sensory scientist. That's what I want
No,
to do. on the
No,
firefight.
there were no sensory trainings in the case of Mexico at that time. When
Oh, I see.
I was well, I studied food engineer as well, but there was no sensory. So I arrived in sensory field because I was fired in another job and I was looking for a job and I I
Yeah,
I started working in this. So it's
exactly. Yeah.
amazing,
I think that might change. Once sensory has been around for long enough. I mean, obviously, there
right?
are many more courses and many universities and many companies see the value of it. That's what so more and more, it's just something it's a very young science. So
Right.
probably in 100 years, it's going to be more established.
Right. Merci pour votre temps, Benoit, à bientôt, and see you hopefully in the next conference. And
Absolutely.
thank you so much. Really, I really
Thank you so
appreciate
much
it.
for having me. Okay, bye.
Bye. A ustedes muchas gracias por vernos. Nos vemos en la siguiente ocasión. Si les gustó, denle click en like. Si no, no digan absolutamente nada. Nos vemos en la siguiente. Chao, chao.